But Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Immigration has been a hot topic, not just this year, but the last several years, of course. But right now, we're kind of at a pinnacle here with a lot of conversations about immigration, immigration enforcement. And I understand that you have sponsored a couple of immigration-related bills recently. I want to start with the Stop Illegal Aliens Drunk Driving Act. So this will classify DUI offenses as aggravated felonies, and undocumented people drunk driving and killing or injuring someone would automatically be deportable. Can you walk me through the background of this legislation, why you decided to sponsor this now?
Well, as you know, we've been very busy on border security measures. With President Trump now in office, the border is now not open, but there's a lot of people in the country that about 280,000 of them under final orders of deportation, including people with criminal records. And we've seen a number of instances where American citizens have lost their lives as a result of the acts of some of these illegal aliens. Laken Riley, Jocelyn Nungare, and others whose names maybe we don't know as well. But unfortunately, many times these are unlicensed drivers, certainly don't have any insurance, and too many of them get drunk or get under the influence of alcohol and cause injuries to American citizens. So we want to make clear that that's unacceptable. It's not acceptable to enter the country illegally in the first place, but particularly when you are harming American citizens, we want to make sure that we make a point of showing them the door.
How does this differ from current law? You said many of these drivers are already unlicensed, which would make them driving illegal. How does this differ from what's already on the books?
Well, we've been fighting for a long time, I have, on immigration enforcement. We want to make sure that legal immigration is something that we fix, because sometimes it's too complicated. But unfortunately, the Biden administration poisoned the well by opening the borders and letting literally millions of people into the country. But we've unfortunately, particularly during the Biden administration, they did not deport very many people, and particularly when they committed crimes like this, DUI, DWI. So while the policies have changed pretty dramatically under President Trump, you're seeing a lot of enforcement actions. We want to make sure that this is included and emphasized and prioritized.
I want to talk about the ICE Protection Act as well, which doubles the maximum prison sentence for offenders who assault or resist law enforcement while using a deadly or dangerous weapon, and increases minimum penalties as well. Obviously, we've seen ICE in the forefront of media and conversations happening, protests happening. Why now did you sponsor this legislation?
Well, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, are law enforcement officers, federal law enforcement officers. And folks on the radical left have tried to defund the police, and now they are demonizing ICE as law enforcement officers who are doing nothing but enforcing laws that Congress has passed. And unfortunately, you get irresponsible leaders like the governor of Minnesota and the mayor demonizing ICE, and unfortunately, occasionally, people are hurt. And particularly in this most recent incident where the woman was shot by the ICE agent after she had used her car literally as a weapon to threaten his safety and well-being. So again, it's a matter of telling people that there's a thin line between law and order and anarchy, and particularly when you have elected leaders who take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States, who then are actively advocating impeding that law enforcement effort, that's unacceptable. But particularly to point out that automobiles can be a deadly weapon too, and we need to protect our law enforcement while they are doing their job at and enforcing the laws that Congress passed.
When we talk about Minneapolis and the situation with Renee Good, the woman who was shot and killed, there are some who say she was not weaponizing her vehicle. She instead was turning away and evading law enforcement, essentially. Do you agree with the classification that Secretary Noem gave, calling it an act of domestic terrorism.
Well, I think it's certainly a crime to use your vehicle for an assault of a law enforcement officer. And the reports I saw, and I know this remains to be investigated and more thoroughly, is we saw a lot of different camera angles on what happened, and some of them were subject to interpretation. Maybe all of them were. But that is her characterization. I would call it primarily just using your vehicle as a dangerous weapon to assault a law enforcement officer, which is also a crime. Of course, domestic terrorism raises a lot of other ideas and thoughts, but certainly those who advocate for anarchy rather than enforcement of the law, I think could well be classified as domestic terrorists.
There are some Americans we've seen out protesting in the streets the last couple of weeks who have voiced their concerns about their own safety when coming into contact with ICE. What would you say to them about the necessity of having ICE on the streets in cities like Minneapolis?
Well, ICE wouldn't have to do immigration enforcement in the streets if local sanctuary cities would cooperate with law enforcement. Typically what happens is when somebody's arrested under state or local charges, ICE issues what's called a detainer, and they hold them until they can release them to ICE. In sanctuary cities where they don't cooperate with local law enforcement, ICE has no other alternative but to use its authorities to arrest people in other settings. Look, a peaceful protest is protected by the First Amendment. People have every right to express their point of view. But when it comes to impeding law enforcement and actually threatening bodily injury or harm to law enforcement for doing their jobs, you crossed a red line. And so peaceful protest, disagreement is fine, but impeding law enforcement, threatening or assaulting law enforcement is unacceptable.
The president has threatened the use of the Insurrection Act to bring in military members to Minneapolis. Do you agree with the president's use of the Insurrection Act in a situation like this?
Well, I think my best take on the situation in Minneapolis is it's not going to be necessary. I saw the lead Border Patrol agent there saying he didn't think that was necessary. I mean, in extreme cases, which is not this case, that federal authorities remain there to see that law and order is restored. But I don't think that's going to be necessary here, and because it looks to me like ICE and law enforcement have things pretty well under control now.
The ICE Protection Act, do you believe that this is something that could have tangible results in terms of keeping law enforcement safe on the streets?
I hope so. That's certainly the goal. We'll see how, I try to reach out to folks across the aisle on virtually everything we work on to see if you can get bipartisan support. Unfortunately, so much of the opposition or resistance to ICE is really based on opposition and resistance to President Trump and any of his policies. So it almost seems reflexive to me, but we'll try and see if we can get this across the floor through both houses of Congress and to the president.
This week, there was a report of some House Democrats who are threatening to refuse to fund DHS altogether unless there are some reforms made to ICE and DHS. What is your response to that group of Democrats this week?
Well, first of all, again, they are enforcing laws that Congress itself has written and passed and signed by the President of the United States. I understand this is part of their resistance to President Trump, and anything that he's for, they're against automatically. But look, ICE needs to operate like a professional police force that it is, and nobody supports any overly aggressive actions or that are unnecessary to do the job. But I think this is just a political stunt, frankly.
I wanted to get your response to the people here in Central Texas as well. We've seen protests all over, not just in Austin, but in surrounding counties as well. Is there room for compromise here in America when we have so much division, especially on this issue of immigration?
Well, I think the area for compromise is where we work together to reform and update our immigration laws, something that I've been willing to do all along. Unfortunately, without much success, immigration can become such an emotional and divisive issue. And part of the problem is during the Biden administration with the open border policies, where literally millions of people were ushered into the United States, it poisoned the political well. So it's very hard to have a rational conversation about what immigration laws should look like. I happen to believe that legal immigration has been one of the best things that's ever happened to the United States. It's allowed people who play by the rules to come to our country and help make the country better while pursuing their dreams. But illegal immigration has been an unmitigated disaster. And we see the price being paid by Americans harmed or injured or killed by illegal aliens. I think we need to finish the job that President Trump was elected for on last November, and that means ICE needs to enforce laws on the books. If there's going to be a change in the law, we know how to do that in the halls of Congress, but once the laws are passed, then these law enforcement officers really have no choice but to enforce the laws that Congress has already passed.
Do you believe there's room for improvement or improvements in training when we talk about ICE? In Austin here, a 19-year-old girl from Austin was mistakenly deported by DHS. Some people may be wondering, are there things that the federal government can be doing better here?
Well, I always believe that you can do better, and mistakes like that are unfortunate. I know were apologies issued, but that's not a lot of comfort to her and her family. But yeah, additional training, I think that's certainly something we should look at. I believe you can always do better, and so we should all strive in whatever our job is.
We are, on the heels of the longest government shutdown in history. We're approaching another deadline here. Do you believe that there will be another government shutdown?
I don't believe there'll be another government shutdown. As you know, this last one, which was the longest in history, was not about funding the government. It was about highlighting the expiration of some expiring, quite generous subsidies for the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. But I think now that people realize that shutdowns don't solve any problems, because the same issues that caused you to shut down are there still staring you in the face when government reopens. And you think about the opportunity cost of dealing with spending cliffs and potential shutdowns rather than just doing the basic job of funding the government on an orderly basis. I'm optimistic we'll be able to avoid that this time. But there'll still be some fights, as there always are. But hopefully we'll be able to get that done before the end of the month.
And one of the last topics I wanted to touch on was healthcare. You just mentioned that was one of the fights leading up to the last government shutdown. Americans are facing record high insurance premiums right now. What do you see as the future here? Is there anything that the government can do that you all can agree on to relieve that pressure for everyday Americans?
Well, of course, a lot of this dates back to Obamacare, which was an experiment which has proven to be a complete failure. And the reason I say that is that the premiums on the Obamacare policies this year in Texas are on average going up 18%, and that's unaffordable. While under the status quo, at least before the Biden subsidies expired, you had people getting free insurance, even people making $500,000 or more. And I think President Trump has a good point when he says, instead of sending the money to insurance companies who skim off 20% for profit and for administrative costs, let's send the money directly to consumers and let them buy what suits their needs the most. Under Obamacare, we have young people who are essentially subsidizing old people, and having to pay more money than they should have to pay if they were buying insurance from themselves alone. So we're open to negotiation, trying to figure out what the right solution is. Fortunately, we were able to do something important in the One Big Beautiful Bill the Working Family Tax Cuts Act, we created a $50 billion rural hospital stabilization fund. We also eliminated free Medicaid services for illegal aliens and food stamps, which allow those resources to be used for their intended audience, which is American citizens.
Senator, it's not often we get to sit down and talk to a U.S. Senator right here in Central Texas. I wanted to ask you, is there anything else you want people in Central Texas to know about the work being done in D.C. right now?
Well, as you point out, we're going to be getting back to keeping the lights on and the government funded. But right here at home, we've got an important election coming up in roughly 40 days. Republican primary and Democratic primaries on March the 3rd will select a new Republican nominee for the Senate, and I am in that race and running for re-election. We also will have Democrats running to contest that race in the general election. So I just hope everybody gets out to vote on March the 3rd for their candidate of their choice. That's how we express our voice and our views and our preferences about the direction of how the government's operating. So that's what I'm spending a fair amount of time on now, just trying to talk about the things we've done. And one last thing you might be interested in is in the Working Family Tax Cuts Act. I worked with Governor Abbott and the entire Texas delegation to get $11.1 billion of reimbursement to Texas taxpayers for the money that taxpayers in Texas spent that should have been borne by the federal government, but weren't during the Biden administration. So those are some of the things that I think are important, not only in terms of border security, but just basic fairness and some of the work that we've been doing in Washington.
Great. I think I just had one last question for you here. Today, we saw a report come out about the president linking his potential action in Greenland to not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. I wanted to get your take on this situation, and do you think it's appropriate for the president to be making that connection?
Well, the president can say whatever he wants. It's a free country, and we believe in freedom of speech. But I think the situation in Greenland is going to be resolved by negotiation. Greenland is an important strategic piece of real estate, and it appears the Danes and the Greenlanders are willing to negotiate with us. We need access to that real estate in order to defend our nation and our security interests in the Arctic and the high north, as it's called. China and Russia are very active there and are threatening to destabilize the world security. And so I think the president is trying to make the best case he can that the United States needs to have more access and greater can depend on Greenland to operate in our national security interests.
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
You bet.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button and get the latest news by downloading the CBS Austin News app.